It's August, an unknown year in the 18th century. A young English explorer, Robert Walton, is on a grueling expedition. He wants to be the first to reach the North Pole. At first, things were going well, but the relentlessness of the freezing Arctic landscape puts hurdle after hurdle his crew's way, wearing them down. They want to turn back, but Walton, ambitious and hungry for glory, is not ready to give up. One day, while trapped in a sea of ice, looking out upon the miles and miles of endless snow ahead, he sees a giant man hurtling along on a sledge pulled by dogs. Unbeknownst to him, this person is the creation of a young Genovese scientist named Victor Frankenstein. This is how Walton describes the creature. He seemed to be a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island, not a European. Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, penned by Mary Shelley at just 18 years old, was the first science fiction novel to ever be written. The name of its titular scientist is well known even by those who have not read the book or watched one of its countless adaptations. Victor Frankenstein, a young, prodigious student, dreams of being able to create a living being. In a fever of obsession, he pieces together parts of dead bodies plundered from graves and morgues, joins them together, and using a secret source, probably electricity, breathes into his man-made man the spark of life. But when the creature opens its eyes and reaches towards him, he flees, terrified at the monstrous appearance of the being he has created. In what ensues, the scientist becomes locked into a terrifying cat-and-mouse game with his embittered creation. Reanimating corpses might seem fantastical to us today, but it would have appeared a near-future possibility to Shelley and her contemporaries. The novel was composed around 1816, at the tail end of the Age of Enlightenment. In the wake of countless scientific discoveries, there was a societal shift towards rational thought, critical thinking, and values of objectivity and equality. New disciplines, new fields of knowledge, new sciences were emerging on a scale never seen before. One of these was the field of electrophysiology. In the 1780s, an Italian scientist named Luigi Galvani found that by passing an electrical current through the nerves of a dead frog, its legs could be made to kick and twitch. Several years later, his nephew, physicist Giovanni Aldini, expanded upon his uncle's discoveries when, before a crowd of onlookers, he applied an electric current to the corpse of George Foster, a recently executed convict. The body convulsed, jaws clenching and eyes opening. To the astonished audience, he appeared to have come to life again. In this time of rapid advancement, it didn't seem too out of the question that next, it would be discovered how to actually re-spark the consciousness of a dead person. There is a similar undercurrent of scientific discovery in Alex Garland's 2015 science fiction thriller, Ex Machina. In this film, Garland explores the ever more tangible consequences of contemporary advancements in the field of AI. Forward-thinking and philosophical, like Frankenstein, it reflects the many questions thrust onto the popular consciousness in a climate of rapid scientific advancement. At what point do we overstep boundaries in our pursuit of modernity? What responsibility do we hold towards our inventions? What makes us human? In the last few centuries of rapid change, these questions have only grown in relevance. But there's another question framed by Shelley in her iconic text, one that many, and even Guillermo del Toro's film, released last winter, for all its merits, does not wholly address. What do we owe the historically marginalized and ignored? The most obvious theme emphasized by Mary Shelley in her preface to the 1831 edition of her novel is overambition, the danger of playing God. There are two creation stories heavily referenced in Frankenstein. The first, of course, is the one from the Bible, in which God fashions the first man, Adam, out of dust, then breathes the breath of life into him, making him a living person. He then creates the first woman, Eve, out of Adam's rib, and tells them to fill the earth and multiply, leading to the proliferation of the human race. The second is that of Prometheus. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was credited as the father of humankind. There are multiple versions of this myth, but the commonality between all of them is this. Prometheus the Titan molded humankind out of clay, becoming its main advocate and defender among the gods. However, he overstepped when he stole fire from Zeus to give to humans, damning him to an eternal punishment. He was chained to the side of a mountain, his liver pecked out by an eagle each day, only to grow back the next morning and be gored out again in an excruciating cycle. In Western tradition, Prometheus has often been looked to as a representative of the quest for scientific knowledge. Throughout Shelley's text, the responsibilities of godlike creation are linked to parenthood. Often, Frankenstein is referred to as his monster's creator, emulating the titles given to Prometheus and the biblical god, both also often labeled as fathers of mankind. Early in the novel, reflecting on his childhood, Frankenstein notes that his parents were not tyrants to rule our lot according to their caprice, but the agents and creators of all the many delights which we enjoyed. That Frankenstein had a happy childhood only serves to highlight his poor parenting of his own child. He imagines that no father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs, but he rejects his own parental responsibility. Few moments in the novel illustrate this as strongly as the image of Frankenstein fleeing from his creation the moment it comes to life. The creature is described reaching out for its creator with stretched out hands and making inarticulate sounds, evoking the movement of a newborn infant, cooing and reaching out for its mother. This not only points to Frankenstein's neglect as a parent, but also the innocence of the creature, with the implication that the harm he later causes is the result of neither his nature nor his existence, but his abandonment. The image of the outstretched arm also recalls Michelangelo's famous fresco, The Creation of Adam. In the only illustration of the creature that actually came from the novel, his reclining, in profile depiction likewise evokes Adam in this painting. With this in mind, one cannot ignore the contrast between the way that Frankenstein and God perceive their creations. Later in the novel, when he is finally able to speak for himself, Frankenstein's creature scolds him for sporting with life. While Frankenstein endows his offspring with perceptions and passions, he fails to anticipate the consequences that may stem from bringing it into the world. Following on from the Age of Enlightenment was the era of the Romantics. Unlike Enlightenment philosophy, with its focus on objectivity, science, and rational thought, Romanticism was all about the emotions of the individual, the experience of nature. The Romantics were distrustful of what they saw as the Enlightenment movement's over-reliance on the trustworthiness of rational thought, and its dismissal of other phenomena that cannot be so easily seen or explained. Still, both movements championed, above all else, the values of freedom, independence, and equality. Mary Shelley's husband, Percy Shelley, was one of the most iconic figures of the Romantic era, and it has been said that her novel shares in this movement's skepticism towards science. But I think that what Shelley really expresses here is caution about how we bear responsibility to our modern creations. Ex Machina also has its own godlike creator. Nathan, a billionaire inventor, creates an artificial human named Ava. He brings in Caleb, an employee of his tech company, to carry out the Turing test on her, determining whether she really has a consciousness, like a living human, or not. The name Ava is a variation of Eve, and the bulk of the plot takes place inside the mansion on Nathan's paradisaic Eden-like estate. Nathan's labeling of his invention as
the greatest scientific event in the history of man
recalls Frankenstein's desire to unfold to the world the deepest mysteries of creation. This theme is highlighted even further when Caleb declares that the act of creating a conscious machine is
not the history of man. That's the history of gods.
Later in the film, Caleb quotes Oppenheimer, the physicist behind the atomic bomb.
I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
originally the words of Krishna in sacred Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita. The use of this quote not only signals Nathan's God complex, but also warns of the ethical consequences of unleashing our modern creations into the world. Alongside the omen of destruction, there is a clear sense of some boundary being violated. Caleb is asked to sign a Faustian non-disclosure agreement before he can begin the Turing test. Already, like we see in Frankenstein, imagery of light and dark, God and devil is at play. Shelley's scientist envisions himself as both a divine creator and later, at the end of the novel, as the archangel who aspired to omnipotence, chained in eternal hell. The room from which Nathan studies Ava and Caleb's interactions, with its plethora of screens offering views from every angle imaginable, is framed as a realm of godlike omniscience. At the same time, the red-lit shots of the power cuts and Nathan and Kyoko's absurd dance scene paints his mansion as a confused hellscape. But Nathan's mishandling of his invention is what leads to his destruction. The film frames Ava as not a decision, just an evolution.
One day the AIs are going to look back on us the same way we look at fossil skeletons in the plains of Africa.
Garland rejects a blanket skepticism of AI technology, likening it to something as natural and inevitable as the evolution of a species. In presenting Ava as an evolution, the film asks whether a significant difference really exists between programmed artificial intelligence and humans. After discovering footage of the earlier AI models, including Kyoko, Caleb, questioning whether he too is one of Nathan's creations, is led to the desperate act of cutting his own skin in order to draw blood. Afterward, he punches a crack in the glass in a gesture that is eerily similar to the one made by an earlier model in her desperation to escape. Despina Kakudaki argues that rather than Ava, it is Kyoko, the presumed domestic worker for the first two-thirds of the film, who unquestionably passes the Turing tests. Under the assumptions made at the beginning of the film by both Caleb and the audience, the silence of Kyoko as the silent side chick, objectified domestic worker, or sexualized young Asian woman, is accepted and reasoned away. In a deleted scene, Nathan states that he bought and recreated a Pollock painting to test if the fake would be spotted. Just as the authenticity of the painting would not matter if it was undetectable, likewise, it would not matter whether Ava and Kyoko, who Caleb only discovers to be AI when she reveals it herself, is human or machine. Qualities like Caleb's sexual orientation or what kind of person he prefers as a romantic partner are no more of a conscious decision than, say, his hair color. Garland posits that our behaviors are decided not by rational analysis, but instinct, whether the subconscious programming of our environment or our DNA.
Please, of course you were programmed, by nature or nurture or both.
This point is further highlighted by the revelation that Caleb was not chosen for the experiment for his skills as a programmer, but due to various base characteristics, all of which Ava was tailored to, suggesting that he, like all humans, is predictable, programmed in many ways.
Good kid.
With no family,
With a moral compass.
no girlfriend. Did you design Ava's face based on my pornography profile?
At the same time, the film does seem to offer some answer to what makes a human consciousness unique. The Pollock conversation that does make it into the film surrounds the distinctly human chaos and instinct that Nathan wants Caleb to embrace when assessing Ava.
The challenge is not to act automatically.
However, it is implied that the combination of these attributes is what makes a human being. Frankenstein's forsaken creature wants nothing more than to be recognized as a person. Abandoned by his creator, speechless and disorientated by the world he has just been brought into, he wanders through the forest, foraging for berries, nuts, and roots, coexisting with the creatures of the earth. He tries to shelter in villages, but the people there, frightened by his appearance, chase him away with violence. He ends up hiding in a hovel next to a cottage inhabited by a kind but poor family named the DeLaceys. Through a crack in the wall, the creature spends his days observing the family's loving interactions, learning language, growing to know them, all while they know nothing of his existence. Finally, one day when the others are out, the monster works up the courage to introduce himself to the family's blind patriarch. But when the old man's children re-enter the house, shocked and frightened by the creature's appearance, the son attacks him and he flees. The looking glass Ava is confined to for the majority of the film strongly recalls the hole in the wall from which Frankenstein's creature watches the interactions of the DeLaceys. Ultimately, all of the creature's subsequent fiendish acts stem from an undeniably human need, the desire for connection. The eloquence and self-reflection he displays when talking to Victor echoes the uncertainty of many an individual, highlighting his humanity and consciousness. Likewise, Caleb's cracking the glass can be read as a mirroring of the destructive yet cathartic actions of the creature who, with a loud scream, sets alight the DeLaceys' abandoned house and dances with fury after his attempt at connection with them goes wrong. As mentioned earlier, towards the end of the novel, Frankenstein refers to himself as the fallen angel. Here, Shelley is referencing the 1667 classic epic poem, Paradise Lost, by English writer John Milton. There, Milton reimagines the biblical story of the fall of man, from the rebellion of Satan the devil, the fallen angel, to the temptation of Adam and Eve. This is another one of the texts that Shelley's novel references heavily, with the first edition even featuring it in the epigraph, Adam's words. Did I request thee, maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me? These words strongly resemble those spoken by the creature throughout the novel, who noteworthily also likens his condition to that of Satan. No wonder that Frankenstein and his creature have become merged in our cultural imagination. Not only is he inextricably bound to Frankenstein as his son, but Frankenstein's anguish mirrors that of his creation. In many ways, Frankenstein's monster demonstrates more humanity than his unfeeling, heartless creator, who has little empathy for his creature and declares himself indifferent to connections with others in his life. The view of humans as machines, as proposed in Ex Machina, can be traced back to the Enlightenment philosophy, which spurred on the Galvanist attempts at reanimation. However, in typical romantic fashion, Shelley seems to propose that a person is more than a collection of moving parts. She emphasizes the connection between humanity, emotion, and companionship. Both Mary and Percy Shelley were staunch abolitionists. Frankenstein, just after bringing his creature to life, describes it having yellow skin, flowing, lustrous black hair, and black lips. These features differ greatly from those of the green-skinned, square-headed monster imagined in most adaptations. But beyond that, they are undeniably racialized. Add to this Walton's description of him at the beginning of the novel, and it is clear to us that Shelley intended us to view him through the lens of the black or brown other. In the middle of the novel, Victor Frankenstein is reunited with the creature of his design. Enraged by the attacks he suspects the monster has made on his family, Victor pounces on him, but the creature does not retaliate, instead urging his creator to sit down and listen to his story. What follows are 6 chapters told entirely in the monster's voice. This section, where the silenced, marginal figure finally reveals his side of the story, resembles the slave narratives that were so popular that they became their own genre during this time, in the aftermath of the Haitian Revolution. Likewise, it has been noted that the monster fits into the archetype of the noble savage, a trope reflecting the romantic belief that people untainted by civilization are inherently good. The creature repeatedly asks Frankenstein to listen to him. When we finally hear him speak, it can be likened to the process of legal and political enfranchisement. The creature's plight of being seen as only pure flesh can also be likened to that of women in patriarchal society. His appearance is the source of his marginalized status, preventing him from being valued and treated as a rational being, much like the prejudice that women face, often valued only for their bodies. The monster ends his speech with one request of Frankenstein, his creator: make him a female companion. At first, Frankenstein complies. He spends hours upon hours collecting parts, assembling a female creature, adding finishing touches. His work is almost complete when something occurs to him. What if this female creature rejects her male counterpart, making him even more embittered against the world? Or worse, What if they do end up together, producing a race of children that could terrorize humanity for generations to come? At this terrifying thought, trembling with passion, Frankenstein tears to pieces the creature which he was at the point of bringing to life. Joy Susanna points out that it is the fear of being forced to recognize the female as thinking and reasoning, her ability to refuse to comply, that leads Frankenstein to so aggressively retaliate against the notion of animating her. Threatened that he may not be able to control her will, he destroys her, enraging his creature and solidifying its grudge against humankind. Ex Machina's relationship with gender is complicated, but no less at the forefront of the film. Some, such as Angela Watercutter, have criticized the film's depiction of its female characters. While director Alex Garland has stated that Ava is genderless, it is clear that Ava's obvious female gendering holds implicit meaning. However, while Watercutter argues that the film ends up reenacting the same patterns of objectification and sexualization with which Hollywood has been depicting women for decades, I believe that the film makes use of these patterns in order to subvert them, in turn encouraging its audience to question their assumptions about women's roles in the media and society at large. One of the key moments of the film is when Kyoko pulls back her skin, revealing herself to be an AI. This moment is a clever subversion of the male gaze, flipping Kyoko's sexualization on its head with the unexpected, unsettling discovery and forcing the audience to engage with the network of stereotypes that revolve around the sexualization, oppression, exchange, and objectification of women. There is a similar implication with Ava's characterization, who, by the end of the film, develops from an object into a subject. Ava's rebellion against her paternalistic creator
Ava! Go back to your room!
can be read as the movement of women from observed to observer. Better yet, to participant in society outside of the domestic setting. She escapes her prison and, as Frankenstein feared of his female creature, quits the Adam she is designed for. Devon Hodges points out that women within patriarchal society have historically had to deform and transgress its framework from within in order to achieve their goals. Ava does so most obviously in her manipulation of Caleb. His name refers to the Israelite spy sent to the Promised Land in the Old Testament. Not only does he spy on Ava in his assessment of her cognitive abilities, but he voyeuristically watches her in moments throughout the film. Ava flips this against him when, just before her escape, she tells him to wait in her former cage, knowing that expecting to see her dress up for him, he will do so instead of prioritizing escape. It is deeply symbolic that Ava clothes herself with the skin and clothes of Nathan's earlier female prototypes in order to venture out into the world. As Despina Kakaduki points it, she fashions her way out using the detritus of what patriarchy, represented by Nathan, has done to women. Ava's revolt, using what Kakaduki calls the gendered choreography that Nathan and Caleb arrange, is a subversive act in itself. In the end, Ava usurps the narrative structure of the film. It begins with Caleb as protagonist, but it ends as Ava's story. Frankenstein derives its canonical status from its potency as an allegory, its ability to be read from various angles, nearly all of which, as its subtitle declares, grapple with our relationship to modernity. Likewise, Ex Machina reframes these questions as they appear in our 21st century context. Frankenstein is a vindication of the othered and the marginalized, imbued with Shelley's egalitarian vision. Similarly, Ex Machina highlights its audience inclination to treat marginal individuals, whether on the basis of gender or race, as not fully human. Both works ultimately encourage us to examine our responsibility towards our modern creations, and most importantly, the care we owe to every living being that shares our world.